Hi, how are you?
Hey, good morning, everyone. So we're going to get started for the next session, and we're going to talk about what blockchain means for businesses. And so my name is Guillaume. I'm the founder at Atato. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We have an amazing attendance today. And so after hearing from Jacob from MetaMask on how individuals are using blockchains, today we're going to focus our attention on how businesses are doing and what uses they find to Ethereum in particular. So before we get started, if you could please introduce yourself and also a bit the company that you represent, maybe for people who are not familiar. And I guess we can start with Kundara.
Sure, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Kundara Phongsathapon, and I'm a partner in a law firm called Baker&Mckenzie and specialized in fintech, blockchain, and digital assets. So for blockchain and digital assets, I support the clients in various blockchain projects, digital asset related businesses or projects, from setting up the company to obtaining licenses, preparing legal documentation, providing advice on regulatory and compliance issues, supporting them in collaborating projects, VC investment in this industry, ICO, STO projects in different industries, and creation of digital platforms. So the clients include businesses wishing to integrate blockchain into their products or services, blockchain-based platform and consortium, corporates who want to raise funds using digital tokens or do tokenization, ICO portals and digital asset exchanges, broker, fund, dealer, advisors.
Awesome. Thank you, Kundu. So lots of clients in Thailand setting up blockchain companies, doing deals in terms of investments. We're going to come back to all of this. Thank you so much for the quick intro and from joining us from Baker&Mckenzie. And then next, I guess we turn to you, Steve, if you can share a bit also.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Cerveny. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Kaleido. Kaleido is a software company that builds developer tools and offers an enterprise API that runs blockchain infrastructure and intends to give enterprises an easy button to rapidly build blockchain-based applications and solutions, and then to deploy them through the entire lifecycle of an application from a sandbox all the way through to production and thinking about mass scaling decentralization. We're a global company. We partnered with AWS and Azure. We run some of the leading blockchain protocols, including Ethereum, which was where we started. We had our roots since 2017, but you can also run other enterprise-focused technologies like Hyperledger Fabric, R3 Corda. And we're working with some of the largest blockchain projects and companies today. We have large networks in North America, in the US, in Europe, in Asia as well. We partner with lots of great companies like Atato, who we've had the pleasure of working with in Thailand. And I'd just like to say that we're really excited for Asia and the region. It's our fastest growing region. There's just so much going on here. And in particular with Ethereum and all the cool things that are going on in this community. So great to be back at this event, and great to see how it's growing year over year as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. And yeah, it's great that we have Kundara and Steve to give us the picture of the business adoption of blockchain and Ethereum, coming from the legal side of things and coming from the technology side of things, actually running blockchains for businesses. And so, I guess before we get started with all the questions, if you could just highlight for us what is the main changes or events that you've seen in 2021, any kind of new project that you think you would like to bring to the community's attention, or any kind of new use case that you have seen change compared to 2020. So I guess for this question, we can maybe start with Steve to continue, and then we'll take the view of Kundara.
Yeah, well, I've personally been in the blockchain space since 2015. And I feel like this is probably the third wave that I've experienced along the way. To your question around some themes over the last year or so, I think one thing that's obviously happening in the financial services space is DeFi and just the huge kind of opportunity and disruption that's bringing from the most established enterprises like central banks, right, and the currency of nations and how we think about something as fundamental as money, but through to beyond money to value. So things like NFTs, right, that go now beyond financial services and are very much in the consumer space today. I think one thing that would be really cool to unpack a little bit in this panel is the concept of enterprise NFTs, and how we're starting to see a lot of corporate interest across all the sectors all major sectors. People thinking about, well, if an NFT is really just a digital representation of a thing or a piece of data, it doesn't have to be a financial instrument. What if it's a vehicle registration number? What sort of innovative things could we build on top of all of the things that are out there, and individuals too with our identities? So I think the one trend I would point out is this concept of NFTs and how it's really just spilling over into the entire blockchain space. And I think we're just at the beginning. Top Shots is definitely cool, and gorillas are really cool too. But this is going to play out over a number of years, and it's going to start to impact every sector and us as individuals and consumers in a number of ways going forward. So it is really exciting.
Awesome, thank you, Steve. And yeah, like you said, it's been 6 years already, and we're probably on a journey for the next 20 plus years, right? Before blockchain is widely used. And it's interesting that you mentioned how NFT could be used, aside from gaming or collectibles, but also to support the needs of businesses. And I guess I can turn then the question to Kunkunarat on your side. Have you seen some businesses look at this type of use cases and business models? And is there any other highlights that you want to share for 2021?
Sure. So I would say that as the world begins to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, I think the blockchain landscape is now alive with activities and optimism. We started to see more and more blockchain use cases. Enterprise blockchain in particular, I think, has grown rapidly in the last few years, with businesses talking a massive interest in blockchain technology, exploring how blockchain can improve transparency and optimize existing business operations, save costs, reduce fraud, expand customer base, suppliers, and partners. This year, many research reports show that many organizations feel strongly or somewhat agree that their organization will lose an opportunity for competitive advantage if they fail to adopt blockchain and digital assets. Whereas back in 2019, I think blockchain was talked about only as a potential to disrupt the business world. So there have been various use cases across different industries. I think with financial services and capital markets taking the lead, in my opinion, we saw many blockchain use cases in global payments. The latest news being, Facebook's Novi launching pilot program using Pax Dollar with Coinbase as custodian. We see the rise of banks testing blockchain for global payments and remittance. And there are also many projects which use blockchain in capital markets in several countries, including Thailand. I think other use cases are like global trade and commerce, insurance and healthcare and energy, and I think the list goes on. Personally, I'm particularly interested in blockchain use in media and entertainment and NFT, of course. Blockchain helps transform the way content is created, consumed, and protected. It opens up new models for media management, including digital collectibles, ad buying, ticketing, loyalty program, risk management, and prevention of piracy and fraud, and many more. And NFTs itself grew nearly tenfold between 2018 and 2020. So when coupled with the NFT growth, I think the media and entertainment are seeing even more opportunities from blockchain. I think these are giving more power to content creators than ever before. Another interesting use case that I would like to mention is supply chain management. We started to see more adoption of blockchain in this area globally, including in Thailand. I think the transparency of blockchain has benefits in the supply chain management. It ensures the integrity of data passing through the supply chain, resulting in efficiency, visibility, traceability, and trust among participants in supply chain. And apart from the benefits like food safety, product recalls, and reduction of fraud and counterfeiting, using blockchain in supply chain can provide better access to credit to smaller suppliers and expanding the network of suppliers and buyers. So a blockchain freight invoicing application deployed by Walmart Canada, for example, uses smart contracts to pool live shipment data into invoices and send pre-approved payments once the terms of the shipping agreement are met. In Thailand, I would like to mention, the Bank of Thailand expanded its project in Intanon to experimental cross-platform project, and the prototype was able to integrate with a blockchain solution of digital ventures called Procure to Pay, and I think it was participated by SCG and Consensus as well. The results show that the supply chain financing industry can be transformed by smart contract features on blockchain, which leads to greater market efficiency and more competitive funding costs, especially for the suppliers.
Awesome, thank you, Kunju. And yeah, very thorough answer coming from finance to collectible to supply chain. And I think what's, I guess, the key takeaway from listening to you, who've been in touch with so many businesses, as you mentioned, the majority of them now understand that they must adopt this technology, right? And what you're seeing this year, if I understand, is just that we've gone from finance only type of applications to broad usage in insurance, in supply chain, in commerce, including from leading companies, as you mentioned, in Thailand, like SCG, and with the participation of the authorities like the Bank of Thailand. So if we stay specifically on Thailand, we know that, you know, for example, for the financial industry, the regulations have a big impact on what the business can and cannot do. And we've seen the regulator in some countries really drive the innovation on the blockchain space. I know you're working closely with regulators in Thailand and in other countries in the region. And I'm just curious to get your view on what you think are going to be the new areas of business that will be allowed basically by regulations in the coming years. And just what's your view on what's the next moves that regulators might make?
So for Thailand first, right? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so this year, there have been many regulatory changes relating to blockchain in general and digital assets in particular. In Thailand, we have a specific law on digital asset, which regulates fundraising activities using digital tokens and digital asset business operations. So originally, digital asset exchanges, brokers, and dealers are regulated. Recently, digital asset fund managers managing private funds and digital asset advisors became new regulated activities, which require a license and which require to be operate under compliance framework too. And in the near future, custodial wallet providers will also be regulated. So that's in the pipeline. There have been some restrictions imposed on exchanges prohibiting them to list certain types of digital assets. There have been several SEC announcements regarding use of offshore service providers, DeFi, blockchain projects by listed companies, and crypto payment. On the Bank of Thailand side, due to the increasing adoption of blockchain technology in Thailand's financial service landscape, the Bank of Thailand has issued the guideline for blockchain technology adoption in financial services for the financial service providers under its supervision. And those are financial institutions, companies in the financial conglomerate of the banks, non-banks who have the license, and payment business operators. And under this guideline, the financial service provider is required to use private blockchain network. Otherwise, if you want to use public blockchain, then a consultation with the Bank of Thailand on a case-by-case basis is required. There are 4 key principles around blockchain business application under this guideline: blockchain governance, IT risk management, and legal risk management. The BOT, the Bank of Thailand, also issued several announcements warning about stablecoin and crypto payments, and updated the announcement regarding involvement in digital assets by banks and the conglomerates. And in the past few years, I just wanted to look at it from a broader perspective in other countries too. There have been many developments in this area of law in many countries. Singapore has revised its Payment System Act. Switzerland issued the Federal Act on the adaptation of federal law to developments in distributed ledger technology, or DLT. Liechtenstein issued a law on token and trusted technology, and anti-money laundering law and counter-terrorism financing law in many countries have been updated to be in line with FATF guidelines on virtual assets. So for next year, I personally think that the trend is that there will be more laws and regulations trying to catch up with the development in this area. With the rise of DeFi and now DeFi 2.0, regulators in many countries are monitoring the development in this area. And with more people holding digital assets, there may be guidelines regarding tax implications as well. The use of blockchain in regulated industry itself may be monitored or required by the regulator for some kind of test of the technology before the public launch. In my view, I think it should be a national agenda for any country to think about their position and their plan relating to digital assets and blockchain, because not only enterprises who get the strategy right will be able to ride on this boom with proper risk management, but also the countries who get the strategies right and design the laws and regulations accordingly will have leverage in this new era as well. So there should be the right amount of space for this technology to be tested and adopted. The regulators should collaborate with the good players in the market to find the right approach in regulating or not regulating some innovation.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kundu. And I guess my main takeaways from this is that, Bitcoin is 13 years old today. Ethereum's white paper is 8 years old. And we are already hearing leading companies like you, instrumental players in the space saying every government needs to have a clear roadmap and agenda on how to use the technology. It's really quite fascinating to see how in such a short amount of time, businesses, but also regulators have been able to wrap their head around what is blockchain, see the benefits, and now we have this drive for comprehensive roadmaps. And it's interesting that you mentioned countries like Thailand, Switzerland, Singapore, who've been able to somehow secure a kind of special position in the space by taking early steps. And to follow up on this, I guess it would be interesting to get your view, Steve, on the US side of things. And also, I guess another question for you, Steve, is, we have literally hundreds of people in the attendance today, so thank you everyone for joining. And what we are sharing today, might seem as abstract for people who are DeFi and NFT. So I think it would be also interesting, Steve, if you could give us like one business case of using blockchain and what businesses get out of it, what value they're getting out of it. Because from an individual point of view, let's face it, for most people, it's an investment or speculation exercise, right, or gaming. But what do businesses get out of it, and what trends do you see on the regulatory sides in the US, Steve?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really good question of kind of where the businesses, what are they really going for, right? In all of this, and we talked a little bit about how financial services space are kind of obvious first movers, but when we step back, in particular on the birthday of Bitcoin and the white paper, and think about it, we started with this digital gold construct, right, as kind of an investment in speculation, as you said. And then we moved in kind of a second wave into value. We've talked a little bit about that, right? And DeFi is this really fascinating space where once you have value, then you can start to build and layer things on top of each other. And it's amazing how quickly these protocols come out stacked on top of each other. And I'm not a specialist in the financial services space. I'm trying to keep up. It's great we've got a lawyer on the panel to help, on the regulatory side of it. But then we talked a little bit about how enterprises are looking at that going, okay, well, if we can do that on top of value or financial instruments, we can do that on top of things in our supply chain or everyday, assets. The concept of digital twins, I think, is really important to understand. We've talked a little bit about it over the course of the last couple of years, but it is a very big deal for enterprises. The idea of just generalizing NFTs into everything. And so the supply chain use case that was mentioned, that we're seeing a huge uptick in, you can now see how blockchain fits in. Frankly, in 2015, the enterprise world was looking around, trying to cram a blockchain into a bunch of use cases that didn't make a lot of sense, or using it as a big glorified time stamping service. We've all seen those articles, bashing blockchain, or that skepticism on the enterprise side. But what's really cool now is we're starting to see these use cases where we're going beyond pinning a hash and doing things like that into, okay, well, if I have a digital twin of the asset, then that really does become the source of truth, right? And just like on DeFi, how we're seeing all these different, unforeseen use cases building on one on top of the other. When we get into the healthcare space and think about certain kinds of data or kinds of records around that, there's so much that we can do digitally. Or whether it's title records or land or automobiles or property or anything that you can imagine. And so our clients, you asked for kind of a specific use case. Kaleido is working across all major sectors. We're seeing things from looking at how decentralization can like just totally disrupt how if you get into an auto accident in the US, the major insurers here have launched a new system for how that data is exchanged between the different insuring parties. While you have a nice mobile app on your phone, what happens in the back office is the same thing that happened 40 years ago, where there's 7 phone calls and a bunch of data is manually put into green screens, right? And so that's one example, but I think it's also a metaphor of where we're at as a society on our digital transformation journey, right? We've got lots of interesting things, but there are whole just major sectors and areas that have been left behind. And so I think I could summarize by saying enterprises look at decentralization and go, okay, actually think about this. It's not intuitive, but we're already very decentralized today because every enterprise has their own data silo, and it's really problematic, right? So when they look at the blockchain and they say, this kind of decentralization can actually drive coordination and efficiency, right? And so when I hear decentralization in an enterprise context, what I'm talking with our clients about across all major sectors is where are those silos? Where are your business processes and your partners the most broken? and how can we completely invert that by bringing, blockchain into decentralized model and all the tools that we now have in our tool belt, from digital twins to enterprise NFTs and more, to bear to solve, some of these age-old industry problems.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. So if I try to rephrase and recap a bit for all the audience, what you're saying is that basically business is decentralized today, and that blockchain is a great way to map the way we actually do business and deal with digitalization into this new type of application with those new tools under our belts like NFTs, digital twins. And it's interesting, maybe, in 5 or 10 years, we'll see consortium blockchains acquire their members. Who knows, maybe centralization will come back this way. There's so much to talk about on the impact of blockchain for the business space. And I guess, maybe what I would like to ask you about next is coming back to Kaleido. We have a question also on the chat, what's enterprise blockchain really? Maybe could you share a bit about what are the Kaleido features? What does it enable for a business? Is there any kind of new feature you want to share? I know recently, congratulations, you open source a big product which was accepted by the Hyperledger community. What this means basically for our audience is that you have people like Steve and Kaleido who are now building the future Linux of the world. Linux has transformed the way startups and businesses build applications. And now we start to have the equivalent coming up on the blockchain space. What is it that you want to share about what's going on at Kaleido, Steve? What is it that you're excited about?
Yeah, and Atato, it's great to have companies like Atato that are involved in this project as well. It's really, while there were, the genesis of Firefly, this new project, I encourage everyone to go check it out. You can download it in 5 minutes and run it. I think of it as basically a Gen 2 platform on the enterprise side. It does not replace a blockchain. You can select the blockchain that you want to run. It requires a blockchain to run, and Ethereum and Fabric are options today that are sort of in the box. But what Firefly is really about is an observation that for all these enterprise use cases we've been talking about, the reality is there's like an 80% set of the business process that will just never be on a blockchain. And so you hear it's a blockchain use case, but really it's a full stack problem. And there are maybe original documents, for example, or sensitive data, patient records that's just not going to go on chain. There's messages and coordination that's happening amongst different parties before, during, after transactions on chain. So there's all kinds of other stuff. And what we found with enterprises is they would set out on this journey to build this cool blockchain use case. And then you just didn't see all this off-chain plumbing stuff coming. And you end up spending most of the budget on your project just doing boring off-chain stuff. And you never really get to doing the disruptive app. And that plumbing stuff really should just be commodity. It should be like Linux. It should be driven through a community. It should be really high quality. So we took the stack that we've built a couple generations for, with some like-minded partners and sponsors, and went to the gold standard place to kind of put an enterprise project out in the Linux Foundation. And have been really excited to see the adoption of this project. And we do believe it's a Gen 2. We've seen, because you mentioned consortia a minute ago, that model. We've seen consortia pick this open source tool up, and we've seen them, their budgets go from spending, say, 10 million US a year down to less than $1 million, and they're actually moving faster because all their money is spent building out their dApps, right? Their blockchain apps. So, as far as just a little bit more on Kaleido, since you asked, we're about enterprise grade infrastructure, right? We mostly run open source code. So as a developer, you can come spin up, the infrastructure you need. Just like AWS, you pay kind of per node hour, per instance hour. So it's very predictable charges, as far as what it's going to cost. It's very low cost. There's a whole bunch of APIs, but it's SOC 2 and ISO compliant. It has HA, high availability and disaster recovery built in, and all the other things. There's advanced key management for how you manage the keys to your nodes, and all the things that enterprises would expect in order to deploy high quality blockchain infrastructure in a production environment.
Awesome, thank you, Steve. And it's amazing again that just 8 years after the white paper of Ethereum, we now have companies like Kaleido, who are basically the cloud for blockchain, right? Which has reached a level of quality, certification, security. I know there was a question about privacy, and there's so much to talk about, but we've reached a point where we have banks, the largest insurance in the US, medical players also, who are comfortable using this technology to run critical business processes. So it's really interesting to hear both of you share about your view on the blockchain space. And we really have a lot to talk about, but not enough time, I guess, for today. And so I guess the last question to recap would be starting with Kunkularat. What is it that right now you're most excited about? What is it that you're working on? Maybe that you can share a bit of what's coming in 2022, and any kind of highlight that you want to share with us. And I'll let you answer first, Kunkularat, and then we'll take the answer from Steve.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I personally think that there will be continued development of blockchain economy, I would say, in which people and machine manage business processes and exchange value without or with less intermediaries, and with cryptocurrencies, which could be public or private, that will transform today's monetary systems. And some blockchain use cases may be stopped, while some may expand, whereas new use cases may be introduced. One of the rising trends that is particularly of my interest is tokenization. I think tokenization makes more asset classes, could be existing one and new ones, tradable online. And tokenization allows businesses to easily fractionalize assets, expand their line of products, and unlock new incentive models at both the consumer and institutional levels. So although there may be quite a few points to overcome for tokenization, such as the last mile problem for some industries or legal and regulatory issues, tokenization should still be considered by enterprises, as it may unlock new value or even a new economy for some cases. I think we started to see tokenization of assets or revenues in many projects around the world. And recently, the first regulated ICO in Thailand in real estate was successfully launched. And I can say that there are many more tokenization initiatives, both regulated and non-regulated, in the pipeline. So I think just for the business themselves, they should have an accurate picture of what blockchain does and does not do, like Steve mentioned. They should know the effects of its various deployment options, especially its network architectures. And they should know when there are possibly better alternatives in some use cases, right? So blockchain helps businesses solve three main scenarios. If you need to process data efficiently, you need trusted transactions and secure business networks. You need to create, issue, and manage digital assets, for example. I think another upcoming trend that I want to mention that everyone should keep an eye on is Metaverse. I think Metaverse is a broad term introduced in a novel 3 decades ago and now attracting buzz in Silicon Valley. I think it generally refers to shared virtual world life-like environments, which people can access via the internet. And fans of the metaverse see it as the next stage in the development of the internet, in which people's interactions can be more multi-dimensional. So Facebook said in July that the company will try to transition from being a social media company to a metaverse company in the next 5 years or so. And just last night, Bangkok time, Facebook announced that it would rebrand as Meta, a name change that underscores its ambitions to refocus the world's largest social network on building the metaverse. And it will even start trading under the new stock ticker MVRS in December. I think although metaverse is not the same thing as blockchain and digital asset, but it may relate closely to them. And there is also a specific type of metaverse which uses blockchain technology. And in these, I think users can buy virtual land, virtual assets, other digital assets using cryptocurrencies. So I must say that tokenization, DeFi, as Steve explained, and NFTs can all be integrated into this metaverse in the future. So such an interesting era we're living in, right? So as business operators, it's inevitable to stay ahead of the curve and plan your business accordingly, including considering whether and which blockchain for enterprise that may be suitable for your plan.
Awesome, thank you, Kunkurat, and especially thanks for the recommendation for the key considerations that companies should have in mind when they consider blockchain. It's interesting that you mentioned the metaverse. I wonder what are the laws of the metaverse going to be, and there's a question about how regulators deal with NFTs, for example, and now that we have the opportunity to create new worlds, what laws are going to be in there, I wonder. But anyway, there are so many potential discussion. We have to be mindful of time. So maybe Steve, if you can try to, wrap up, tell us what are the things you're excited about for 2022. And once again, for both of you, thank you very much for joining and answering our questions today.
Yeah, well, Guillaume, I guess next year we can do this from your metaverse living room. We can all host us all. But
I'm gonna sell you an NFT of myself.
Well, thank you all for attending and for having us. I guess just to throw one more thing out, just the convergence. I guess for those of us who've been more on the enterprise side of things for a number of years with public blockchain. Things are really coming together. I'm personally very excited about ETH2 and achieving kind of the upcoming milestones, how layer 2s are evolving, really seeing a mirror on the public side with what enterprises are really interested in, and I think things like network of networks and how different sectors are going to cross connect, move value, collaborate on things. We're now transitioning into that era. I think it's going to be really cool, and I think we are just getting started. Even though it's been a quick and crazy 7 years, the next 7 are going to be even more interesting. The technology has matured tremendously. It's on the public side, enterprise has shifted, consumer mindset has shifted tremendously, and all the ingredients are right to take kind of that next big step and that next big leap, and that's what I'm really excited about.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kunkurat, and thank you everybody for joining us and for the great questions. Sorry, we all of them live. We're going to answer them in the chat. Keep them coming. So thanks again. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kunkurat, Baker&Mckenzie, and Kaleido for joining us. Next, we're going to have an interesting panel on decentralized finance, and especially for Thailand. Please stay tuned, and thank you everybody for joining us.